The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on proposal technology, the lightning round. We've called this the lightning round because we only have about 50 minutes to discuss and answer questions about a very important topic that could take us days. I am Mallory Price, Marketing Manager, Coordinator for this webinar and Shipley's online learning courses. Thank you for joining us and investing your time with our panel today. We received a lot of questions from you as you registered. We're going to address as many of those as possible during today's session. You may also ask questions during the webinar using the questions tab in your control panel. I will personally monitor those throughout the webinar. We are recording this webinar as well, and we'll post it on our website for replay or for you to share by tomorrow. We have an experienced panel with us today to share thoughts and ideas about technology and its role in proposal development. We have Paige Frame, president of McKinnon Mulherin, a communications consulting firm, experienced leader and writer with expertise in applying various technology tools in proposals and other document-driven projects. Josh Ellers is owner at Patry. Josh has developed software solutions that help companies evaluate opportunities and manage their probability of winning. Lisa Puckrin is our Shipley team lead of a global team of experts. Lisa is highly proficient in team leadership and has practical experience adopting and applying several proposal support software solutions. Kimberly Balfour is a Microsoft proposal manager who brings several years of experience managing and writing proposals of all types, including international proposals. She is familiar with many software applications that support proposal professionals. We also have Patrick Ryan and Kyle Peterson with Visible Thread to help our proposal technology discussion. And Brad Douglas is our Executive Vice President of Global Strategy at Shipley. Brad manages our global network of offices supporting clients in various regions of the country. Brad will moderate our panel discussion today. So we have a great panel with us, lots and lots of experience. For today's agenda, first up, we will talk about proposal technology guidelines, what those are and how to follow them. Then we will talk about some examples of solution providers. Then we'll go over technology solutions, including opportunity qualification, RFX parsing, and compliance matrices, and so on. And when we get to the end of the webinar, we will answer any questions that we still have time to answer. And like I said before, we will get to as many questions as we possibly can during the webinar. So without further ado, Brad, the time is yours.
Okay, thanks, Mallory. And again, thank you to the panel and all of you for carving out a little time. I need to take just a minute to pay tribute to one of my dear colleagues and mentors who passed away a week suddenly and unexpectedly. He was our chairman here at Shipley, chairman of the board, Steve Shipley. He passed away a week ago Friday. And he has been a huge influence on me professionally and personally. And so just want to acknowledge that. I know as I look through the registration list today, I know many of you probably know Steve or know of Steve and his contribution to the proposal development profession. So thanks to Steve for all he did for our profession and our community. So let's go onward, and Josh Ellers has joined us, and thank you, Josh, for doing that. Josh and I have facilitated a couple of sessions or participated in a couple of sessions similar to this through APMP and other channels. And Josh has shared on these panels off a couple of interesting facts. So Josh, I'm going to click these next couple slides. Wondered if you would just briefly just talk about how important this topic is, this topic of competitive proposals and possible solutions. Could you just address some of these facts?
Of course, Brad. Yeah, thank you again for having me. Great to be with you and the team here today. I find it really interesting as you look at the breadth of this industry and the revenue produced through the competitive proposal process. This, we're estimating by 2023 will crest about $15 trillion of revenue. And a lot of us work in these industries working really, really hard to win business. And if you go to the next slide, Brad, one thing to note is because these opportunities are so competitive and they're much more involved than a traditional sales opportunity, typically our estimates show that these proposal heavy red tape opportunities cost 5 to 7 times more than a traditional non-proposal, non-RFX opportunity. And the downside of that is because these opportunities cost so much, when we lose the opportunities and the costs associated, time and money, in aggregate, our numbers show that this cost is a $200 billion cost globally. And if you run up to the next slide, Brad, one thing that's going to be super interesting is, as we talk through today, and Brad will cap this off, but I find it super useful to consider technology, but not just technology, but vetted and proven processes to ensure we can win more, to ensure we can dedicate the time and resources to the right opportunities, and more importantly, learn from our mistakes, learn from our wins, learn from our losses. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Brad. I hope this sets the stage for the team here to really talk about how technology can facilitate improved win rates, improved efficiencies, lessons learned, etc. So with that, if there's anything you'd like me to cover, Brad, in addition, would be happy to jump in further.
Great. Thanks, Josh. And you've done some tremendous research and you work with a lot of different companies and a lot of different industries. So setting this stage of how important these competitive bids are and then what we want to talk about for, like Mallory said, unfortunately, we only have about 50 minutes, to talk about a topic that is so relevant, so important. It's ever changing. It's not static. And so, Josh, perfect job setting the stage of just how important winning and competing for business is. And anytime we can create efficiencies and streamline this, the process, the methods, the approach, our submissions, anything we can do to streamline efficiency is valid. And we're going to talk about the pros, the cons, things to watch out for, some possible solutions. We're not doing a deep dive into any one solution. I want everyone to understand the intent of this webinar today is not to be promotional for any one or two or three solutions. It's only to talk about and share what are some tips, some ideas that could help us, and then hopefully it will maybe prompt you to go forward and look into some of these technology solutions that can help all of us. So thanks, Josh. That was a perfect setup. Just a couple guidelines here, and I won't dwell on these. These are pretty intuitive, but one thing about technology and bid and proposal management is we can't let the tail wag the dog. What do I mean by that? We can't get so dependent on one solution, one technology, one method that it's dictating everything else we do. We've got to be open-minded and we've got to look at the big picture and understand where proposal development fits within the whole life cycle of our businesses. So be careful that we don't let one simple tale, one simple technology dictate how we do everything else, because that's dangerous. Use the best of the best. There is no one size fits all technology solution. I promise you that. We're all in different circumstances, situations, environments, markets. there is no one-size-fits-all solution. And I think the panelist will follow on and address that. We cannot eliminate the human side of proposal development. It's still critically important. Peer reviews, color team reviews, kickoff meetings, all of those things that make us agile and flexible in how we compete. You can you can lead a horse to water. Okay. So yeah, we can buy glitzy technology. We can buy solutions off the shelf. They can tailor them. But unless we can apply it and actually drink, it does us no good. We've got to be able to implement. So we got to know up front when we're looking at technology solutions, how we're going to execute and implement that solution. Because, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't necessarily make him drink. We've got to be able to execute. And then test everything. Try it. Make sure it's going to do exactly what you need it to do before you determine what solution is best. So based on your questions that you submitted when you registered for this webinar, these are the buckets, if you will, the topics that we're going to have our panelists address. Opportunity assessment tools, how those can help us. Content management and reuse libraries, there were a lot of questions about that. Proposal workflow and proposal management in general. Desktop publishing, editing, proofreading, technology tools. Readability is a huge thing, and there are some great technology solutions that can help us there. And then any other topics that you put in the question box, and then we have time to address. Okay, and this is clearly, and you all will know this is not representative of all the solutions out there. This is just a sampling of some of the proposal development and readability technology solutions that you all are probably familiar with, maybe not so much. We're familiar with several of these. This is a place to start. If you need a menu of some tools that might be helpful, here's a guide. When we get into opportunity identification, there's different sets of tools, and subscription services, but technology solutions that can help us on the opportunity assessment, opportunity identification part of our businesses. So again, very much a partial list of potential solutions. So let's get on with it. Let's get on to that first bucket we talked about of topic. And that is, let's start with the beginning of an opportunity assessment solution. So here are 3 questions, 3 of them, several were submitted upon registration. What functionality should we look for to help us identify and pre-qualify opportunity potential bidding opportunities? Good question. And Josh, by the way, I'm going to ask you to address these. So when we get these 3 up, if you'll take over, how well do technology solutions filter opportunities? For example, to our AEC, Architectural Engineering Construction market. Okay, good question. Can any of these tools help us assess competitors? Interesting question. So Josh, would you just take a shot at addressing these 3?
Absolutely. Now, keep in mind, with my background as a former head of proposals, capture leader, a sales leader, I have bought a lot of these technologies. I've leveraged them on the market, and now as a vendor, we have positions in terms of what is best and what is not. And I want to address this from my position as a former practitioner here. As we're looking for functionality for these assessment solutions and identification solutions, you really, number one, have to align to the market that you are pursuing. And there are a lot of really strong market-specific identification and assessment solutions out there. With public sector, for example, there's Deltek GovWin, there's Bloomberg, there's GovTech Navigator, there's GovSpend. And for others that are more in construction or architecture or engineering or supply chain manufacturing, there are very interesting subsets of assessment solutions out there. So based on your company type, you know, you're going to gravitate to those market-specific solutions. And as you look on the market, I think it's going to be really interesting to be able to check out, for example, if you're focused on public sector, there's a company called GovSpend that, by the way, we're not a partner or sponsor for. This is more for information. GovSpend, like some other solutions out there, can actually help you identify public sector opportunities, but also assess competitive wins based on FOIA requests. So they can proactively reach in and see how much your competitors have won with certain customers. You know, super interesting stuff. And I think across the board here, it's really important to reference the fact that, you know, back to the original comment on, you know, what's really best for my company. I would really promote a market-centric approach for your company to buy technology that aligns to your market. I would say from an opportunity assessment standpoint, you really want to make sure that you have something organically that can allow you to see where you're strong and where you're weak on the opportunities, and that could be sector agnostic. And then finally, I you know, especially with the work we do today, you need to have something that allows you to, number one, assess your company's risk profile and your ability to win an opportunity, and align all of that info with financial data. Can you be profitable with this opportunity? How much money and resources will you be expending to pursue it? And can you still be in the green, if you will? And finally, one thing I'd say to really kind of tie this off is, you know, one thing that companies like ours and like others on the market are doing are creating assessment opportunities pre-opportunity. You know, should we pursue, and the debrief post-opportunity, and leveraging that data to inform the front-end assessments, right? That's the virtuous cycle that every company really needs to get to, regardless of the solution you're using. So hope that answers the question, but my assessment, again, as a proposal, capture, sales mix of experience on my part, there's a lot that you can do. You know, one word of caution before we jump into the next section that Brad takes. Be really careful, and I want to double click on what Brad said. Be really careful to not let the technology dictate what you do. Technology is a facilitator to the company's mission. And if your mission is a proposal manager, capture, business development, whatever you're in, if your mission is to close more business, if it's to boost efficiency, if it's to improve the company's brand, and all of the above, you know, leverage the best technology that gets you there and really leave the rest behind. So with that, happy to jump into more of this, Brad, but that's really where I stand in terms of what to look for with these types of solutions.
Thanks, Josh. And you know, these bullet points here that we're looking at, you know, everything from the financial data, the qualification data, when we're making those bid decisions, you know, those pursuit decisions, you're right. These are great tools and points. If there's something that can help us do this better, more completely, we ought to be looking for technology that can help us in this way, streamline the process, save time. So thank you for sharing that. And notice this answers specifically one of the questions. Yes, there are products, including Josh's solution, that can filter opportunities, you know, by markets and owner and value and so forth. Thanks, Josh. Let's move into a next area, and that is proposal workflow and management questions. Here are a few of those questions that were submitted that we want to at least address kind of quickly. How effective are some of the tools that claim to parse out, strip out RFP requirements from solicitation documents? What should I look for when comparing these types of solutions? Can a software solution streamline the tedious task of building a compliance matrix? Great question. How about an outline? Is there something that could help me build an outline more effectively? I was wondering if, Ryan, if your team is on with us, Kyle, if you could address some of these questions from a practitioner view, knowing what you know about helping manage workflow, parsing out RFPs, building a compliance matrix, and so forth. Any thoughts on these topics?
Yeah, thanks, Brad. So there are definitely some novel solutions and tools out there to parse through RFPs, particularly once you get into, hundreds of page solicitations. Kind of maybe narrowing down onto the next two questions. Really, you need to understand what you're looking for in an RFP. So it's kind of similar to the first topic, but what themes do we need to pull out? So generally, your high level ones: price, schedule, delivery, compliance type information. You can't miss that, because if you do, you're either not going to win the business, or if you do win the business, you might not have priced something accordingly. You get yourself into a bit of a compliance morass, so to speak. So understanding what you want to pull out of an RFP will kind of direct your search into what kind of tools you're looking for. And that's just kind of a natural transition then into the third question. Yes, there are solutions out there that essentially, traditionally, contractors would, and I've had to do this myself as a practitioner in the past. You take, a PDF and you're copying and pasting into Excel, and it's really kind of a soul-destroying process where you haven't even really gotten into the important work of understanding the requirement when you're spending so many hours simply getting the requirements into a usable format. So there are definitely tools that can help with that process, where you can actually get into that commercial value add decision-making process, understanding what am I being asked to do. And then, from there, you can tailor the parsing to pull out those themes that are really important to you and to your business. And then just reiterating Josh's point, highlighting those themes that your business does a good job of addressing to win business, and then, either mitigating or removing some of those weaknesses from your proposal.
I don't know how you said it. You said something about soul wrenching or something about
soul destroying, Brad.
The tedious task of building a compliance matrix. And we're familiar with Kyle's technology and Visible Thread and some of their solutions, and those type of solutions can be huge time savers and efficiency gains. So again, we're not in the business of promoting any specific solution. However, this is an area where it can bog us down as proposal professionals if we're trying to do all of this manual work. There are ways to streamline and make it more efficient. So thanks for that, Kyle. What about an outline? Have you seen anything that could help us more? Maybe this is just something we need to do as practitioners, but can software or technology play a role in helping us build an outline from a compliance matrix?
Yes, I would kind of caution it by stating, every context is different, so your outlines might differ, but in terms of getting requirements into a usable format, you can at least get the documentation down, the requirements separated and parsed, and from there, you can kind of slice and dice it and put together an outline. But that's so context dependent. That's where, going back to those themes you highlighted, Brad, there is still a human element and where software is so important and saves us so much time and can kind of help act as a force multiplier, there still needs to be some thought behind what you're doing. And I think that's where software can get you into that good fight faster. But it would be a pretty powerful tool if you could, parse and create an outline. I haven't seen anything that goes into that extent, but reducing that initial manual touch time up front gets you into that outline creation faster, and ideally doing it more thoughtfully.
Love it. Yeah. The outline is going to be driven exactly what you said, and I just want to repeat it. The outline is going to be driven by the context, the instructions in the solicitation or the discussions we've had with the customer, or, if it's a U.S. federal proposal, the Section L. So you're right. And thank you for clarifying that, because I don't think there is a silver bullet, that will build an outline for us. But the software that parses out all the requirements and make sure we're not missing anything and we're responding, we use that to then populate the outline so that we just don't miss a thing. Everything, every requirement is addressed. So thanks for clarifying that. Ryan, I'm sorry, Kyle, I almost called you Patrick. Ryan. All right. Any final thoughts about this topic and just managing the workflow in general, Kyle, that you'd share with us?
No, I think that's a good intro. Certainly can expand upon that if necessary, ask any questions, but I think that's kind of a good highlight of ultimately understanding within your context what's important to you. That'll dictate the tool, and then once you get into the tool, understanding, once again, that kind of proposal win context would then dictate the outline structure, and there'll still be some work to be done there.
Okay. And then a couple other questions that surfaced that were kind of around this workflow proposal management. Are there tools that can help build a proposal management schedule? Are there some ideas for facilitating virtual color reviews? So I'm going to this is unrehearsed, so I'm going to ask Lisa Puckren, who's with us. Lisa, have you found any tips or tools that can help you build a proposal schedule more effectively?
Yeah, I think, a lot of the RFP management systems, so RFPIO, RFP360, QVDN, you can establish deadlines at a question level, section level, project level. So as a proposal manager, they've really helped me corral the troops and make sure that everybody's on time. Color team reviews, a lot of the platforms, you can set up review cycles. You can have in RFPIO, you can set sequential reviews. So, one person reviews, then another, group of people. So definitely those help help keep the process going and make sure that you have that all automated. So yeah, there are quite a lot of helps out there for that.
Great. Does anyone else have any thoughts before we move on to content management, about workflow management, proposal management? Any of the panel? Okay. Well, let's move on. And Mallory, please, if there's questions being submitted that fit into this topic, please feel free to jump right in, interrupt us, and we'll address those. But let's move on to this next area, and quite a few questions here. This seems to be an area of proposal development that's gaining a little more familiarity and popularity. You see, those of you familiar with APMP, the Association of Proposal Management Professionals, you see some groups starting to form and come together, professional groups, to talk about this area of how do we manage our content and get the most out of our content. So here were some questions. What is important to look for in a content or reuse library technology solution? Great question. Is there a typical ramp-up time to populate and configure a content management system? Interesting question. What are some of the risks with using reuse library tools or platforms? So I think Lisa, I'm gonna ask you again. This is part of your responsibility. You've had pretty broad experience with technology solutions here. Would you address these three questions?
Yeah, you bet. So I've kind of had a proposal life before RFP and content management systems. Then the last 10 years I've had, you know, a wide variety. So I personally have used RFP-IO, RFP360, which was recently purchased by RFP-IO, Qvidian, which is now owned by Upland, and Chorus. So that's obviously my frame of reference as I answer these. So what is important to look for in a content management? So in my experience, when we're talking content management, I feel like most systems are the same. They can store your content, they can organize your content, you know, in various ways, and it's very easy to reuse them. Where I think the huge difference comes in is beyond content management. So it's the RFP management side where the platforms really differ. So I'll touch on that a little bit as well. I think when you're looking at systems, if you haven't used one, I think that the first thing, or even if you're using one but maybe not happy with it, or you feel like you're maybe investing more time than maybe it's worth, I think it's exactly what Brad was saying earlier. It's one size does not fit all. So the first thing I would say is make sure it fits your team situation. So if you have a small team, maybe it's just you, a lot of proposal managers out there are running solo, supporting a team. And when you're in you have a small team, you really need easy to manage tools. And I think tools like RP360 are great with that. Easy to manage, easy to set up, require really low maintenance. If you're working on a large enterprise or global team, then you need a more sophisticated system. And I found RFP-IO to be great for large global enterprise organizations. The other thing to think about are what are the types of RFPs you're looking at? What RFPs are you managing today? Are they in Excel? And do you have a wide variety of formats in Excel? And if that's the case, then I think RFP-IO and RFP360 do a great job with a wide variety of Excels. It seems like companies just like to torture us proposal managers, and they're always issuing in a weird Excel, and it's important to have that flexibility if you're heavily in Excel. I know in the tech industry where I've been the last while, lots of wide variety of Excels. If you're doing Word, I think, the pressure's off a bit. Most platforms handle Word quite well. If you're doing PowerPoint, most of the platforms are still trying to solve for PowerPoint. So it's on roadmaps, but they're still working on that. The other thing to think about is project management. That's really, for me, where the huge time savings comes in. Automatic assignments and reminders, collaboration between authors and reviewers, automated process status reviews, no version control issues. How many times as proposal managers have we had version control issues? Systems really help control that. Having guests be able to access and come in and answer on an RFP, a partner, external, somebody not in your platform, that's important too. And I would say the last thing on that is good customer service, account management. If it's your first time going out there, make sure you pick a company that has great customer service, because you'll need some help there. Typical ramp up time, I would say if you have a simple database, if you're maybe storing it in Excel, you've got some tabs, you could spin up as fast as like a week. If you have your content ready to go, it's simple to import and get up and running, start your first RFP and build from there. If you have a large database, maybe a global RFP team, 1, 2, even maybe 3 months, depending on the complexity again, getting your data in is quite easy. It's making decisions that impact all your different groups. Some best practices I would say is get your content organized in Excel if you haven't got it organized yet. That'll make things go a lot faster, and have it organized by categories. Figure out what kind of tags you think you might want, and that goes along with categories. And make sure your content is tagged or, like I said, organized before you upload it. As far as risks, I actually think the risks are super low. I know it's scary when you haven't used a system, but I actually think your risks of being in Word and Excel and version control issues in Google Docs. I remember one RFP, I was in Google Docs and someone went in and deleted everybody else's stuff. So to be honest, you're a lot safer moving to an RFP and content management platform. The SaaS model means everything's backed up in the cloud. There's versioning that you can, rely on. The only other risk I think is important is if you are using automated answering. So almost all the platforms out there have some kind of version of automated answering where it'll answer your questions for you. I have found it personally, it's very effective on basic, simple answers. What's your address? What's your phone number? What's your tax ID? But if you get into long sentences or multiple questions on questions, most systems, I mean, it's nearly impossible to be that sophisticated in technology. So don't just rely on it for things like that. Make sure you're checking your answers. And then I would just say too, if you're implementing a system for the very first time, make sure that you have a strong advocate, somebody who is going to pull the reluctant ones along, and make sure you've got executive support to help back that up. It's a huge change management for people who've never used systems before, and you need that advocate. So those are my thoughts. Thanks, Brad.
Great advice. Good good lessons learned, and I think you answered a lot of our questions that we had. And again, I'm sure Lisa, if you reach out to her, would be more than happy to share insights and lessons learned, as would I think all of our panelists. And some of the panelists are solution providers and offer free trials or demonstrations, things like that. So take advantage of that if you're joining us today and have interest. Okay, the kind of the last area, but it's pretty extensive, so we're going to have to kind of go at lightning speed here, thus the lightning round. There were a lot of questions about not just workflow and opportunity assessment and qualification and all of that, and content management, but a lot of questions were around this idea of our message, readability. And so what is readability? How can we improve it? Is there some technology that can help us? So some of this is going to be really kind of tactical about some tips, and you asked for this also, tips on using some of the tools we probably 100% of us in this webinar today have access to some of these basic tools, the Microsoft Office suite, for example. So one area of readability that comes into play, we all know, many of you have been through some Shipley training or you're familiar with APMP best practices. We have to be sensitive about the look, the feel, and the actual words, grammar, formatting of our proposals. So some of you ask questions. Are there any hints on using Microsoft Word to streamline formatting and building templates? So we have Page Frame here to talk about that a little bit. Are there template software tools? It's kind of the same type topic. So these are the topics now for the next little while in the webinar that we're going to go ahead and address. Some ideas on applying styles, creating templates, using keyboard shortcuts, developing checklists, and customize the quick access toolbar. So we're going to have Paige and Kimberly talk about some tips and ideas on using Microsoft Word and some of the other technology tools that will help us when it comes to readability. I'm also hoping Kyle will chime in here. Visible Thread, the company that Kyle is with, has some tremendous tools about helping us with this readability to make sure we're getting the best evaluation we possibly can from evaluators. So Paige, would you spend some time just sharing with us some tips and tricks around Microsoft proposal templates, styles, and other tools that maybe we don't know about or we forget about?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Brad. I know that there's so many cool tools out there in ways that we can put proposals together. And a lot of the time we're going to be ending up in Microsoft Word. And so I wanted to share some of those, some good tips for making that process more efficient as you're working in there. And one of the questions that we just went by was talking about how we could streamline building templates in Microsoft Word. And I've been kind of mulling that over the last day or so. And I would say try not to streamline that process, that you should take the time to build a really good proposal template in Word so that when you are at the point where you're creating your proposal and putting content into it, that it's strong. It's a really good template that you can trust will work well for you. So I would not try to streamline that part. I would take time, create your template up front, something that you're really proud of that works well, it's clean, and then draft directly into that template from the very beginning. So putting your outline in there, starting using the headings even at the outline phase, and then in the prototype phase, as you're just saying, here's what I'm thinking of talking about, putting that into the template is going to save you a lot of time in the end. Instead of you formatting everything from scratch and everything's just normal text, you're going to have a pretty good start to what it looks like, and you'll just be cleaning up rather than doing the whole formatting from the base up. So that's what my main tip is, to use a good template and then use those styles very carefully and consistently, which goes into the next tip, that if you are using your styles consistently, accurately, there are a lot of there's a lot of automation already built into Microsoft Word. So a couple of these you are likely familiar with. If you go under the reference tab, you can insert a table of contents that's pulling all of your heading ones, and if you set it to include sub-levels, it'll have heading 2s, heading 3s in there, and automatically populates that table of contents, gives you the right page numbers of everything. Some people might not be as familiar with inserting captions, and this is just as useful as the table of contents, that when you put in a table or a figure, you can click Insert Caption. It will use your caption style that you have identified, and you can type in what your caption is. And then as you're going along, if you end up moving that to a different area or add text or whatever you need to do, it's going to automatically number your figures from the beginning to the end. So you don't have to remember what the last one was, so you get the right number. It's just going to automatically do that for you. And you can do figures and tables, and it'll number those separately as well. Even less known, so that's under the References tab. If you go into Insert, you can actually do some really cool things with quick parts in Microsoft Word. So I'm going to just cover a couple that I like. The first one is referencing a heading with the style ref field. So when you go to Quick Parts, it's going to pull up what kind of field do you want to include. This style reference, if you put that into, for example, your header, and say, I just always want my header to refer to the heading 1 style, then in your header, whenever there's a new heading 1 style that comes along, it'll automatically populate that. So when you're in the section, the introduction section, your header is going to say introduction because it's referencing your heading 1. When you get to company background, it'll automatically update it to that section. So again, saving you some time on these things that we used to manually update and have to double check and make sure that they're right, can be very helpful. The other one that I think is pretty cool, and this is not for your final proposal, but can help you in the drafting phase of your proposal. Everyone knows how to check your page numbers, your total page numbers, but sometimes we're trying to track how many pages we've got in a section, and you can include this quick part called section pages, and it'll count the pages in that specific section. So if you're using section breaks throughout your proposal, this is just a quick thing you can put in while you're reviewing to see if you are within the page limits of that section, and use that as a quick guide rather than having to go back and count your pages each time as you're working through it. One note with all of these, but the table of contents, the captions, any of these quick parts, they do automatically update, but they might not do it immediately as you're changing things. So if the fields are if they don't seem correct in the moment, you may need to update them. And a quick way to do that for your whole document is to select all the text, and the quick hand is Control-A in your PC, and right-click it, and you can put Update Field. That'll update all of these figure numbers, table of contents, any quick parts you have, give you accurate numbers. And really the biggest piece of all of this is you're going to let your proofreader at the very end focus on some higher level thinking mistakes. So things that they really, that we need a human brain to look at and understand, your proofreader can focus on those and not be so worried about all the figure numbers being accurate, or table of contents, or things being spelled the same way in different sections if you're referencing your different headings.
Boy, Paige, I wish we had 3 hours. I'd love to keep learning these tips and tricks. So thank you. And there's one more that I think maybe we underutilize, that we thought important to talk about here. Would you address track changes?
For sure, yeah. I hope everyone is using track changes. It's a great way when we're doing review loops to know what's changed in that review loop. It helps us with version control to see what's changed in that version. And back before we had it, when it was very easy to collaborate and all be working in the same document, often we'd have a lot of these different versions and need to combine our documents. Depending on how your organization works, you might still be doing that, and that's fine. You can use that compare button and combine them so that all of your track changes are in the same document, which you really want to do before you start accepting or deleting any of those new comments. And one tip that I think is really helpful is sometimes you end up with a lot of different reviewers in your document. So it is important to get them all in one place so that you can see what's changing. But you can go under Show Markup and pick just the specific people you want to view at once. So you can have all the changes in there, but just be viewing certain changes at a time, and accept, delete those, and then go to the next reviewer, but still stay within the same document. So that's a good way to keep track of your versions and make sure that no comments are lost as you're going through.
Great counsel and good tip. Thank you, Paige. And again, feel free, anyone, to reach out to her for additional insight, guidance on, parts of, we're all familiar with Microsoft Word, but there's so much there that can help us and streamline our work. Okay, let me keep this moving along. I'm just going to touch on this. There were some questions here around this idea. What are some cautions or tips for using links, hyperlinks in proposals that are submitted electronic and so forth? I'm just going to address this really quick and we're going to move on. We need to be really careful. And the key here is if we're responding to any type of request, solicitation, often in the instructions, they will tell us whether or not we can use links, links into websites or videos or graphics. So just our counsel here is just know your customer. Know how it's going to be likely evaluated, your proposal, so that you're not including links if it's not possible for them to even get to them, or you're not using motion graphics when they're not going to be functional for the reviewer. So the answer to this question really is make sure we know as much as we possibly can about how our proposal is going to be reviewed and what will work and what won't work and what the customer has asked us to do or not do. And these are often areas where when we have a chance to ask a question or two to the customer after we get an RFP or draft RFP, these are questions sometimes we want to ask. What about video links and what about motion graphics or use of QR codes to redirect? So just know your customer is the bottom line here. Okay, we want to continue quickly on this readability, which includes proofreading and editing. Are there software solutions that are effective at proofreading and editing? Of course there are. Which solutions have you found most helpful? We're not going to try, we don't want to be overly promotional on any, but Kimberly works for Microsoft. She works on global proposals around the world. And this is a simple tool that she's commented on before. Kimberly, you want to just quickly mention this, and then I want to share one other tool that addresses readability.
Yeah, so Perfect it basically complements the grammar and spell check that's already in Word, and it goes a level deeper by checking consistency on abbreviations. You can see the list there, hyphens and dashes, bullets and lists. And so it takes out the tediousness of editing those types of things so that as an editor, you can get your document really clean with those consistency checks, and then you can focus on the more strategic edits. Some different examples of how it goes beyond the Microsoft Word functionality. You can see it's smart enough to flag like inconsistent spelling is one. Typos that spell check wouldn't pick up. Inconsistency in how you're spelling out or not, the numbering. Capitalization. And again, these are things that Word wouldn't necessarily catch. You'd have to do it yourself as an editor, and so it just speeds up the process. It'll help you make your bulleted lists consistent by checking the mismatched, punctuation and inconsistent bullets. And then it creates an abbreviations and acronyms list at the end, and it will tell you which acronyms you've used that you haven't spelled out. It will tell you when you started using an acronym before you've spelled it out. It's pretty robust functionality there that helps you do that best practice of quickly creating an acronyms list for your proposal.
Great, thank you, Kimberly, and again, a good addition. If this is an area where we need some help, this is one of many tools. And then I would ask Kyle again if he wouldn't mind spending just a few minutes on visible threads technology. They have a visible thread writer solution. And this, I want to take us clear back to one of the early questions, though, about compliance and compliance matrix and so forth. This is part of their solution package as well, is helping build that compliance matrix and then monitor and track progress against that. But specifically now, Kyle, would you just address quickly some of the readability functionality of this solution?
Yeah, sure, Brad. I know we're coming up on time. I'm pretty passionate about this topic as a proud liberal arts graduate. Looking at, winning business, you obviously want to make sure you're being consistent with just kind of your general proofreading and grammar, but actually looking at the language itself, avoiding long sentences, avoiding passive voice, jargon. Some jargon, depending on your context, is necessary, but you shouldn't really be gratuitous with it. Because if you have an evaluator going through 400 or 500-page proposals, we want to make sure that the language is approachable, moves the ball down the field, and isn't overly embellished or complex. The brain can only absorb so much information at a time. And what we want to avoid, and this is no slight against evaluators or their intelligence, but we want to avoid evaluators having to reread long sentences, maybe not understanding who's doing an action. There's your passive voice. Even looking at acronyms, particularly on the government contracting side, it's alphabet soup. So we want to make sure that we're being consistent in our usage of acronyms. Are we defining them correctly and consistently? And so if you can avoid that ambiguity, it makes the evaluator's life far easier, and then you can win business. And maybe I'll just finish with a quick story, less so from the proposal side, but this readability is so important up and downstream. In a past life, we had a really complex aircraft maintenance proposal that was being audited due to the dollar value. And once again, no slight against auditors, but they weren't aircraft maintenance experts. And so when they were going through our cost volume and looking at our basis of estimates and explaining how did we reach that cost per flight hour number, how are we building up our cost structure, there were a lot of questions, because these aircraft maintainers, they're experts in what they do, brilliant, but you need to make that language approachable for someone who's not an expert at aircraft maintenance. And so avoiding some of that jargon and complexity, you can almost head some of those questions off at the pass, where we had to spend many hours kind of getting together and say, I had the same thing. I was a contracts manager, like, hey guys, I don't really know what you're saying here either. How can we answer the auditor's question? So this readability topic is so important when you're winning business, if you've got business in the door, and we just want to respect our audience and meet them where they are. And there are tools available that can go through, and in real time, it'll call out, this is a complex sentence. This is a long sentence. Provide suggestions. Hey guys, maybe throw a period in. Imagine that. Maybe use a bulleted list. Things like that. And avoiding jargon to the greatest extent possible. But obviously, if you're delivering cancer research, that proposal will just be more complex than landscaping. But these tools get you to that point where you're kind of thinking about that eyes wide open and not simply just trying to get the proposal out the door. Because if it's not readable, it might not be compelling.
Exactly. Great. Thank you so much, Kyle. And thanks to all of you. We are at time, so I apologize we didn't have more time to address the questions during the webinar, but I hope you'll reach out, and feel free to reach out to our panel. But we've talked about mostly technology solutions. You combine that with industry best practice about basic proposal 101. These are things we need to remember as well, and technology can help us. Leverage our lists, group similar ideas together, use headings to guide the reader. This is all about readability and scoreability for the evaluator. Use graphics that support our message. Be simple, be concise in our words, as Kyle just said. Active versus passive is better most of the time. Avoid technical jargon and wordiness. So thank you so much. There are a ton of advantages to technology. We just need to be sure we understand the pros and cons. Also make sure we have the necessary infrastructure, support, commitment to implement. It does us no good to invest in technology and have it not function the way we expect it. We've got to have the infrastructure, the commitment. We've got to test, make sure it does what we want, and be sure we're staying current. There's always new solutions coming out there. We need to be vigilant and looking and exploring and have an open mind. So thank you again. Thank you so much for joining. We're past our time, and hope you have a great rest of your day, great rest of your week. Be safe, and thanks again for joining us. We'll hopefully have you again on our next webinar. Take care.